Okay, great. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining today's KETIV Virtual Academy session. If you're watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button and check out the links in the description for more resources. Today, we have Austin Purvis joining us. He is our KETIV Senior CPQ Solutions Engineer, and he's going to be talking about seamless CPQ implementation. We're so excited that you're all here and you're enjoying the learning experience that is KETIV Virtual Academy. After this session, you'll see a link to give us feedback on the session. Let us know what you thought. You can also let us know if there's other topics you'd like to see covered. Please fill that out. It helps us make this program better for you. I also, again, wanted to highlight our KETIV learning program. Oops, got ahead of myself. Here we go, our KETIV learning program. This is a program. It's a subscription-based learning platform with both live and on-demand trainings that are unique to your company and your manufacturing business. It comes with your own KETIV advisor, personalized learning plans, and unique workshops each quarter. You can learn more about this program by scanning the QR code with your phone, or I'm going to drop a link in the chat if you'd like to check it out and learn more about custom training. Okay, and now I'm going to let Austin take it away.
Hey everyone, thanks for having me. My name is Austin Purvis. I'm a Senior CPQ Solutions Engineer here at KETIV. Today we're going to talk about integration, considerations, and data preparation for seamless CPQ implementation. So here we have our agenda. We're going to talk about CPQ integrations first, how we set up that integration data flow, when you're planning for an implementation, how you should think and plan about that. Then we're going to move on to the data collection and gathering and what that looks like, best practices, how you should plan your configurator flow, and then specific considerations when you're planning for different features in CPQ. And then we'll have a poll at the end, just getting your thoughts on implementation. And then we'll have some Q&A. But feel free at any point to drop your questions in the chat. We'll be monitoring that as we go. But for now, thank you for attending. So a little bit about me. If you've attended one of these before, this might look familiar, but I do have my background in aerospace engineering from good old Oklahoma, Boomer Sooner. And I started off as an engineer at the defense contractor Raytheon Technologies, working in their missile division. And then I decided to make the jump over to technology and specifically the CPQ configure price quote space. So I was an implementation engineer, which is why this topic is so much fun, at least to me, because I spent most of my time in technology. I'm fairly new at this at the pre-sales side, but I've spent a lot of my time with implementation. So the post-sales, once the statement of work was signed, I used to get to meet with customers and talk through what their requirements were, outline a scope of work, and so that's why I believe I have a lot of experience and some insights I maybe can give into that. But as I said, now I'm on pre-sales and I get to talk and hopefully find solutions for prospective customers. So let's start with overarching, what can CPQ integrate with? And we have a diagram here that shows some of the different things, but realistically, some of the main integration softwares, excuse me, that CPQ can integrate with is CRM and ERP. Those are big ones, specifically ERP, Enterprise Resource Planning software. So you can think like Microsoft Dynamics, Oracle, SAP, Epicor, any of those. There's lots out there, but that's where you're keeping a lot of your material data or your routings, things like that. And so a lot of times this data is replicated if you're using, let's say, Excel spreadsheets. You'll have maybe some of your material data, some of the pricing for that. A lot of times that's held in ERP. You'll keep that in your Excel sheets. And so a lot of times when people are looking to implement a CPQ system, they think that that data also needs to be kept in CPQ. And realistically, what a lot of times I used to recommend and what I still recommend is that you keep ERP as your source of truth for, let's say, costing and material data, lead times, planning, things like that. And same for CRM, your customer relationship management, like HubSpot and Salesforce and NetSuite. That is where you want to hold your customer data, their contact info, where they are in the sales cycle. Now, we can build things in CPQ like tacked on CPQ, which here at KETIV, that's what we sell and implement. But what we recommend in delivery is to keep those separate, and so you have your single sources of truth. So rather than maintaining the information in lots of different places, you want to make sure that maybe ERP has that data and it can flow to CPQ so it can reference it, but you're not writing the data in CPQ. So there's a lot that CPQ can integrate with. We actually are coming out soon with a KETIV connector software that can help aid in that connection to pretty much anything on the web, which is pretty cool. Stay tuned for a announcement on that here in the next month or so. But one of the things that you need to think about when you're thinking about when you either have a CPQ or you're thinking about implementing CPQ is how are you going to get data back and forth. So you want to think about the level of effort to set up because it can be quite high because you might be using custom APIs, application programming interfaces, where you're talking with the back end trying to get information back and forth. A good example that I might reference here in this KVA is like in CRM. Maybe you want to get some of your customer information when you're making a new quote. You want their name, you want their address, maybe some of their details, and you want to maybe put that in the proposal document that you'll create in CPQ. Rather than hosting that in CPQ and your CRM, you're going to only want to host that in CRM and then set up an integration where that data is flowing to CPQ so it can reference who this customer is and all that. Now, you need to think about the level of effort to set that up. Is it going to be a custom API call where you have your internal developers or maybe a third party implementing that for you? Are you going to use a middleware software? And when you're thinking about that, you also want to think about the maintainability and the security/access. Who has access to it? Is it maintainable for your team, or are you going to need to pay a third party to maintain it for you? So these are all things that you should think about when thinking about if you're going to do an integration with CPQ. So I mentioned this before. What is the source of truth? You need to think about, and I've written some of these things down, but towards the last bullet point, I have some suggestions for when you're thinking about doing an integration, how you should plan it out. And I really like diagrams.net. It's a free website where you can diagram, how data flows. I mean, you can diagram anything, but I like to use it for, making boxes of, okay, if we use the customer relationship management example again, I have my new customer data. Let's say I get a new customer, and in HubSpot or my CRM, I'm going to input their name and their details and where they are in the sales process. And I want that data to be pushed over to my CPQ solution every 5 minutes, every hour, every day. I mean, it kind of depends how often that you need that data there, or how quickly you need it there. But how is that going to look? How is it going to share information? So I'll diagram that. New customer created in the CRM, and I'll do a little arrow, and it needs to come into CPQ when we're making a new proposal for that customer. And you can make it as detailed as you want. Some of the things to think about are what are the flags that are going to trigger this flow of information? That's really important. Maybe it's when you save a new customer in your CRM, that'll trigger the integration to pull that data and place it into CPQ to be available for the next time you make a quote. You could do it on a polling service. So maybe once a day, it takes all the new customers and puts it into CPQ. You can also make these integrations two ways. So maybe in CPQ, if you want to update a customer, it can flow back. That can be a lot heavier of an implementation, but it's still possible. So there's a lot of possibilities, and I highly recommend you go in there and you start to think about actually what that physical flow is and what the flags are for that. So that's a little bit about the integrations that are possible, and you'll hear me talk about those here and there as I discuss some of the later topics that we have in this KVA, like data collection when you're planning for an actual implementation of CPQ. But I did want to touch on this at first and say, when you're thinking about bringing CPQ into your organization as a whole, you definitely want to think about your current softwares and how CPQ can fit into your technology ecosystem. So that's very important, and hopefully it's a little bit helpful, but definitely diagram it out, pencil or paper, or some of these sites like diagrams.net or Lucidchart. So next topic, data collection. Let's move on to this next slide. So there's not a lot on this slide, but this part for me was always really fun when I was on an implementation/delivery team, because I really got to learn a lot about customers' products. And that's one of the beauties about my job and getting to work with lots of different manufacturers. I get to hear how these products are made, what goes into it, the materials. I'm always shocked, or I guess not even shocked, but just surprised how complicated these products can get. I worked with a door manufacturer once, and the interior doors, I couldn't believe how complicated the insides of that were, and how many pieces go into doors, and all the thoughts and thought and logic that needs to go into that, depending on the door size and what's needed and required, and if there's glass, and it's just amazing. Whatever you make, I'm beyond impressed. But for when you're thinking about a CPQ implementation, and you're preparing for it, you want to think, am I going to do a top-down or a bottom-up approach? So what I mean by this is when you're thinking about the data that needs to go into your CPQ system. So let's take Tacton, for example. You either want to think about all the different parts that make up your main product. All right, so that's your bottom up approach, where you have all the different parts and you're going to kind of end with this one assembly. Or top down is you have your assembly. So if we're going to continue with doors, and then you think about all the parts that go into that. So your hinges, your handles, the pieces of plywood or the MDF board that's going to go on either side, and the honeycomb that's going to go in the middle. So you want to think about how your product actually comes together. And a lot of times what I'll have my customers do is actually sit down with me and think about how would their sales team or how would customers actually configure their product, right? Are they going to pick different parts first and then get to that final assembly? Or are they just going to have the assembly, maybe pick some features, and that's going to build the bill of materials? So you want to start thinking about what are all the pieces that could go into your product, and then the optional features. And so this leads, once you are thinking about that, is what's your configurator flow? So this is a big slide, and I don't want to gloss over this too quickly. But the first thing is you should think about, and again, use that diagrams.net or pencil and paper to write this down, or Excel, or whatever works for you. But think about, first of all, who's going to be using this? A lot of times it's end customers. Most of our customers use it for internal sales teams to start off. But think about who are the end customers, because there's going to be different configurator flows depending on the customer. And there's a lot that can be reused between user groups. But think about who's going to be using it. So let's say it's a sales team. Now, based off those user groups, what's the user flow? Are they going to come in first, enter like let's say it's an internal sales team. Maybe they'll enter the customer name, and then they're going to go in and add a product. Let's say you sell furniture. So the first product they're gonna select is maybe a bench, right? You sell all these different types of furniture. They're going to select a bench, and then they're going to go and configure that bench. But how actually are they going to configure it? Are they going to choose a model first, and that's going to give you a starting template? Or are they just going to start from scratch and say, I need a bench that's 18 inches wide by 12 inches long and 18 inches high. And then from there, they maybe pick some legs, and they go through and pick some finishes. Think through how your sales team's going to do that. And they might have a very different flow from an end user if you're going to have that. The end user, you might want to actually guide them along and say, hey, here's the different options you have. You can, maybe you're upselling for certain types of metal legs or wood legs if we're still on the furniture example. And then for the sales team, maybe you don't need to go into that much detail. They know the product well, and so you can just quickly push them through the configuration and make it really easy for them to click all the buttons and have a configuration out really quickly. And then even after that, where's pricing going to go? How do you want them to see their screen? What's the most effective, user interface for them to go and select? What are the pictures that are going to be needed? There's a lot that goes into when you're planning for this CPQ implementation, but it's really worth it, especially before you talk to your implementation team. It's really helpful. Obviously, here at KETIV, we can help guide you through this. But it really is a valuable exercise for you or your team that's implementing this to sit down and think, how's the user actually going to interact with this? And so then once you have thought about that, you want to think about the logic. What are the rules and constraints? And this again goes back to the bottom up or the top down approach. You want to think about, when you're thinking about parts, you can think about the logic of how it goes together and then build your way up to the user interface. Or you can start at the user interface at the top, and you can kind of trickle down to what are the different parts? What are the logic that goes into those parts? And then how do I get to my final bill of materials? And when you're thinking about the bill of materials as well, you want to make sure that you have consistent SKUs or part IDs and ways to identify the different parts that you're selling. And a lot of that usually comes from your ERP system. A lot of customers I've seen are using Excel sheets, which all works great, but usually the reason you're coming for a CPQ software is that you want to start to organize that and get a more intelligent system in than Excel. And I want to spend one more second on the logic. Really, this can be tedious, but it really is worth it to think about and write down some of the main logic drivers for configuring a product. So when you pick a product line, I think benches are nice because they're very simple. But think about maybe if I have a bench that's 18 inches long, I have to have an extra leg in there to be able to support, right? This is when you want to talk to engineering or whoever has that tribal knowledge and actually start to think about and write out. Excel is a really good method of, what can and can't fit? What's the logic? What are the constraints that take place? If I'm going to configure some legs for this bench, what are the legs I can use? What are the sizes I can use? And what restricts those? I'm going to really start to list those out because that's going to help the implementation team understand what you're trying to build. And they're going to be, accelerated in their development process. So that's the main configurator flow, what you should plan for. I love this part if you can't tell. I think it's very fun talking to new customers and thinking through what they want and what's going to give them the best return on best return on investment quickly. So I always think this is really interesting. But the next few slides are actually going to be on different features that CPQ offers and how you can prepare your data or prepare your team to implement that. So the first one is CAD automation. We support Autodesk Inventor, SolidWorks, PTC Creo. And so I don't have a lot on this slide, but my biggest advice when you're preparing for CAD automation is you want to think about, what do I want from this CAD automation? Obviously, you want to think, maybe I want drawings. Maybe I would like a 3D step file. That can come from my CAD software. And so when you're doing that, open up those models in whatever your CAD software is. Let's say it's Inventor, and think about, okay, if I'm going to be configuring this product, what's going to change? Am I going to be hiding and showing different parts in the model? Am I going to be actually changing the sizes, right? Through a CAD automation, maybe I'm going to stretch that bench top off or make those legs bigger or smaller. Think about, since you've already gone through the configurator flow, what is it that the user is going to change that's going to impact the CAD model, right? So think through those different things. Make sure your naming conventions are clear. That's really helpful, and it saves us time in the implementation phase, having to go back and forth and ask you questions about what different parts and pieces are in this CAD model. And so you can see in this visualization that we have here is we'll create your assembly and your product model in Tacton, and then from that we'll map that directly to the CAD parts in your CAD model, and that'll directly influence what's shown and what's stretched in during the CAD automation portion of Tacton. So really important, figure out which parts in your configurator flow are being mapped to the CAD model. So those should be either one-to-one, or you should be able to figure out the logic for what's going to be shown in that CAD model or drawing. And two, the naming conventions. Make sure those are clear. Make sure it's very nice if those match up with what's in our Tacton product model and what's in the configurator flow. Those kind of part IDs in the bill of materials. That is always fantastic when it matches up with the CAD automation. The next one, and I think this is really fun, is the visualization. I wish I had an eye for kind of the artistry of this and the colors and things like that. But we have some members on the KETIV team that are fantastic at this, at the visualization portion. But I do love planning for it, and I've done a few implementations like this. But always that last little that artistic part where you want to have the shine or the texture finish. I always have a hard time figuring out or seeing what looks good. But we have some members on the team that are really good at that. I wish it was my strength. But when you're preparing for a visualization, you want to think about, what type of visualization do I want? Because there's a few different ones. Do you want 2D static, 2D dynamic, or 3-dimensional? 2D static is, you basically just have a picture, right? So as you configure your product, maybe you have these base models and there's just a picture that's shown. Either it's, as you can see in it's actually a video, but the static 2D image would be that picture of the shaft on the left. It doesn't change, nothing updates. It's just there, and you can replace it with other images if you want. 2D dynamic would take that a step further. So you still have that picture, but maybe some things change on it. Maybe you actually add live dimensions on there so that when you stretch out the elevator, just the dimensions change, but the picture doesn't change. And that can create a better experience for the user. Or you want to go the full way, and let's see if we can start this here, and I'll start to play that as I'm talking, is you want the whole three-dimensional scene like what you're seeing here, where it's getting bigger. You can see the different textures changing in the inside, the different colors. You can drag and drop different things across the model. This is obviously a bigger implementation effort, but it can be very valuable to show your customers what they can expect to receive when they purchase from you. So that's something you want to think about when you're first thinking about visualization. A lot of times we'll recommend visualization for more of a phase two. You want to, a lot of times I will recommend that you get the return on investment, you start to use it, implement it with your sales team, and then when you're looking to go with the end customer, maybe then you start with you implement a visualization, the visualization module for Tacton, where you can actually start to add this on, and it helps your sales team. If you want to do artificial reality, they can go on site and they can actually show what it looks like. I had a customer who wanted to who built lifting machinery. And they went on site to colleges and gyms and things like that, and would actually pull out their phone and show them the branded equipment in their gym. So that was really valuable too. But it was a phase two, so they first got return on investment with selling the equipment and customizing it and getting the pricing and bill of materials automated. But then they expanded and actually created a scene which helped supercharge what their sales reps were doing. So when you're planning this, you want to think about the models you already have. A lot of customers have CAD models, which are really heavy. They're very precise. They're engineer level, um, uh, computer designed models. But when you're presenting things in the cloud like this in Tacton, you need them to be what we call decimated or lightweighting the models. So you can run those through different softwares. Inventor has some capability to do that. There's a few other softwares out there that are really good at lightweighting and decreasing what we call the polygon count. There's a lot of videos on that, and if you're thinking about doing visualization, I would recommend going and watching some of those and figuring out how to properly prepare your models for a cloud solution like Tacton. And then also similarly to the CAD automation, decide what is configurable. Like the elevator video that we just watched, if I'm going to change the width of the elevator, does that mean the width of the elevator in the scene is going to change? It doesn't have to. A lot of customers, and myself included, would think, yes, it needs to change because that's an important aspect to see. But maybe if you're picking a new trying to think, maybe if you're picking a new panel in the back, you don't maybe necessarily need to see what that looks like. Maybe you can just get away with a picture rather than trying to put it in the scene. So obviously the more things you put inside the scene that are configurable, the higher the effort to implement, but it can be very worth it if you want to show your customer an accurate product. Um, the last thing I would say for visualization is when you're thinking about doing this, think about the materials that are going to be I call them textures, but think about what it looks like. So that bronze in the picture back there, or what the arrow with the floor number looks like, or the buttons. And if you don't have good pictures of those already online, go out to your product. Take with good lighting, pictures of those products. Take close-ups of the materials. If you have, let's say, a notebook like this, right, that has the leathery texture, you want to make sure that you take a good close picture of it. And so then when we're implementing the visualization, we can take that and actually make a realistic, what we call texture, and we can use that throughout the scene. So it's great to have good pictures of that, or at least the hex codes for the colors. Start to pull that together for each of your products. So that's obviously important too. And then the last thing we'll talk about, and then I will finish up, is the pricing data. And this one's quick. Basically, for this one, a lot of people have it in Excel already, or maybe they have it in their ERP. Wherever it is, I would recommend that you have consistent part IDs or SKUs or whatever you call it, accurate descriptions, and then think about price changes. How do you update your prices? Do you create a new kind of a new part with new pricing? Do you just update that pricing? What if you do historical data? What if I've had customers before who they will honor the pricing that the customer is quoted at for, let's say, 6 months or even a year. And so If you do that, you might have to make another line. And where is that going to be held? Is it in your ERP? CPQ is able to host that as well if that's where you want to keep your pricing data. But think about those things. And I recommend, if it is in Excel already, look through, make sure those part IDs are matching up with what you can expect in your bill of materials, because that helps line up those parts so we don't have to map those more manually. The descriptions are helpful, especially as we're developing, because we can go through and check and see and make sure that the price data matches up with what maybe your bill of materials looks like. So I would recommend thinking about those things. The other thing is thinking about discounts, margins, how are a lot of those calculated? Who can change those? You can see all this flows together when you're thinking about the user flow. Do you even want your end user to see pricing? That's something to think about. Who can add a discount? Who can change the pricing? Maybe the pricing is different for different dealers. How are you going to define that, and where are you going to keep that? I recommend a lot of times putting that in like a Google sheet or an Excel to explain to us on the delivery team how you price. So if you have a dealer portal and maybe there's a percent discount that you always give to this specific dealer, list that out. Say dealer X, and we give them a 10% discount on just the base parts, or we give them a blanket 10% discount, 5% discount on the end product, or off the entire quote. Whatever it is, write those down for us, because then you can just send over that Excel or the Google Sheets or however you want to share it. And it's all kind of in one place for us to reference as our delivery team is implementing. So that's my whole spiel. I could go on and on about this. Please reach out to us here at KETIV. If you have any questions, to we would love to talk to you about first what you might be thinking about integrating. You wouldn't believe what we've integrated with CPQ before, but a lot of times it's CRM, ERP, even PLM, product lifecycle management. So give us a call, send us an email. I'm happy to take a look at what you're manufacturing and see how maybe if we can help integrate your systems with CPQ. And then also if you're thinking about a CPQ implementation, or you are have already implemented Tacton, or maybe looking to transfer to Tacton, give us a call and we can help you plan out what that configurator flow looks like. I always think that's very interesting and a lot of fun to do. So thank you for attending, thank you for listening. I do have a quick poll, and the question is, which data set would be the most intimidating to pull together, or what has been if you've already implemented CPQ? And it's pricing, visualization, product data, configuration logic, or user flow / user interface. So go ahead and answer that, and then we will move on to the Q&A while people are filling that out. Any questions at all, feel free to put them in the chat. But thank you so much. Really appreciate you listening. And if you have any questions, please reach out. Thank you. Okay, so we have some data back on the poll. Looks like pricing and product data are tied for the top, and I would completely agree. I think that's typically what I see from customers that come looking to implement a CPQ solution. Typically, some of that user flow and visualization is important, but yeah, I absolutely agree. That product data, it can be hard to get everything out of the engineers' heads. But it's well worth it to get into a CPQ system. And then pricing, usually they go hand in hand, that product data, those SKUs and part IDs. Typically they'll correspond directly with the price, or maybe there's a bunch of parts that make up that assembly, and there's pricing there. But yeah, no, that's great to hear from everybody. But thank you so much for attending. Hopefully it was valuable to you. And if there's any questions at all, feel free to reach out to us here at KETIV. Thank you.